as well as the first orbital space tourism experience provided entirely with American technology. For this latest flight, the 4 lucky participants will be launching aboard the SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule to an altitude of around 250 miles for 2 to 3 complete orbits of the Earth. Next news break, top of the hour.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
That is me. Wow. If you hear any barking, I'm not doing it. But anyway, think about this. A rat that big, James. You remember the $1 million grant they got to take these rats and put them in little cars and have them drive these cars around, a track?
I do.
Could you imagine 100 and some pound rat in a car?
Yeah, we could just put them in one of them, one of them little electric cars and just let them go to town.
Yeah, and then when they get the road rage, they just eat each other.
Oh, I'm telling you. Apparently, these huge rats, their brain wasn't too much bigger than our current rats today with the small bodies, so that's kind of unique.
Well, put it this way, I really take my hats off to rats because if they can learn to drive a car and they suffer road rage like us humans, they're not as dumb as we think they are.
Exactly. Believe me, you're exactly right. That's amazing. They can even drive these little cars. But when's the day going to come when they, they just drive off and they don't come back?
I don't know. Hey, well, our guest is on. Hi, Larry. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing really well. Now, our guest tonight is Larry Hardren. He's a former D.E.A. agent. He's wrote, a couple books. We're going to talk about, the books, but I want to ask you if you can give a little bio to all the listeners about yourself. And then I got a lot of questions to talk about, and then we can get into your books and all that stuff.
All right, thank you very much. It's incredible, my life, the way things turn out. Growing up back around Plum Creek out there in Taylorsville, Kentucky, farming and running the creeks there, that I took off into the military. And the military opened a lot of doors for me. It really did. I loved every bit of it. I served in the Navy, but then had an opportunity to serve with the Marines. That's what really helped me out to focus on my career on law enforcement. And after that, with the military, I worked with the Federal Bureau of Prisons as a correctional officer, jumped from there as an immigration officer, then got very blessed by getting an opportunity to join Drug Enforcement Administration, D.E.A. And with D.E.A., I served almost 24 years working strictly narcotics. The streets of no matter where I went was my office. It was my world. I loved every bit of it. Whether it's the prostitutions working the streets or where they're homeless, I felt more comfortable with them because I knew exactly where they were coming from and dealing with them, gathering information. And so I spent those years out of San Diego, transferred to the desert of Yuma, and from Yuma just start working cases, especially the books. They tied in with the case, particularly out of Yuma, Arizona, where I focused on some brothers that were getting a lot of help from corruption. When I say corruption, some corruption, not all, in law enforcement that I identified at the port of entries. But anyway, what a blessing to have you have me come on as a guest, and I hope that your audience will learn something from this because I do have a lot of experience working narcotics and the crime that's behind it, and the politics and so on.
Interesting. Now, my main question I want to ask you too, or start off the questions, how did a lot of the agents feel about legalizing marijuana?
Well, I can tell you that if we step back almost 30 years ago, if I've seen anyone smoking a marijuana joint, I will put them under arrest right away, or I will take their car. I mean, I have done that. I have took their homes. I took their cars. with our asset forfeiture units. They're boats, speedboats, you name it. But if you're talking about today, I'm totally against legalizing drugs, especially marijuana. Alcohol is a drug. It's a crime. It's what's happened out there with abuse of alcohol. But when you mix alcohol with drugs and marijuana, then marijuana with methamphetamine, it leads to other problems. And we are going to have problems. I can assure you that. But it's all about taxes. It's all about generating money that they can use for special programs and so on. But I'm totally against it. A lot of younger agents in DEA, I don't know. I've been retired for 8 years now. And I don't know about the young generation of DEA agents that are in, but I can assure you guys like me, we're totally against the marijuana. It should not be legalized. And by the way, it is still a federal crime. You know, most states do have it legalized for one reason. It's all about the money. They're just taxing it. But is it going to stop illegal trade for marijuana to enter our country? Actually, you don't have to bring marijuana across the border anymore. If you do, they'll use marijuana as a decoy. In other words, as a decoy at the port of entries, they want people at the border, law enforcement, to target the marijuana loads, and so that way the smugglers can bring behind that, you know, their coke and their heroin and their meth, and so on. But answer your question, I don't know. I can't speak for the younger agents, but I can tell you, guys like us, DEA or the other law enforcement, we're totally against it.
Interesting. I know that when you really think about it, I have some children. Well, they're adults now. They started out in marijuana, and a lot of people, it's legal. It's no big deal. But I watched a couple of them start out with marijuana, and then the next thing I know, they were into heroin.
That's correct. You mentioned marijuana, but when I came back from Colombia, I had a few years left before retirement, and my primary job in Colombia at that time was cocaine trafficking in the coke labs. But what I experienced when I came back was the OxyContin, the other prescription medication, legalized by pharmaceutical companies and pushed by most doctors, and that's what really threw me a loop there. When you say heroin, I can tell you cases after cases where when I came back, I was targeting, working the OxyContin Vicodin on the streets, and a lot of users of heroin did not want to take anything else except heroin. They would take their OxyContin. These are legit patients. But we'll talk more about that. But it absolutely leads to other drugs. And don't let anyone fool you. And you experience that with your own family, of your own daughters, your own children. And it does lead to something else. And heroin is extremely, very addictive and hard to get. But like I say, most heroin addicts, they'll take that OxyContin at OC, and they'll trade off for heroin, and so on.
That's what's scary. So, so what are the feds now? Kind of just like turning their eyes with people that, with marijuana, they're just not going after them anymore. And the way it sounds like the Congress and stuff want to basically, allow it to be, legalized.
Okay, you just said something right there was so important when you said the feds. Let me explain to you and to the audience, as working narcotics, street narcotics, and working throughout most of the part of the world, and even been in Spain several times. What I've seen, it's not the federals or local cops. It's not the narcotic teams that are working in narcotics. It is our Congress. It's our politicians. It's politics. Not to talk bad about any politics of certain parties, but I can assure you, when the president, before this president came in, he was very lenient towards drugs, extremely. Even his attorney general, Eric Holder, was extremely lenient towards drugs itself. But when you say federal, it is not federal. Federal hands has been tied with the local PD, the cops, and so on. They love what they're doing. I'm telling you, you always got a few bad cops out there, but most of them love what they're doing, and they love enforcing the law. Drugs can kill, just like alcohol, but when you say that federals, it has nothing to do with the federal. They're mandated, or they've been told to do what Congress is telling them to do, the politics. Both parties are at fault. I can tell you that now. When one party blames the other one, it's the other party. Okay? And it's all about, once again, where can they find that revenue? I mean, look at the majority of the party. He was a Republican, not to mention his name, but anyway, he's lobbying for the marijuana, the stores out there, and he was a strong Republican. He was a majority or the minority leader at one time, and now he's out there because of the revenue, the money, pyre grief money. But no, it has nothing to do with the cops out there. Cops will enforce that law if they're given a chance to do it, but they're not anymore. Their hands are tied. Hey, we're talking right now in California, okay? In San Diego, California, where I'm at right now. The whole state of California, even for cocaine, it's lesser charges out here than it is somewhere maybe Alabama or Tennessee or Kentucky. Each state has its own whatever laws or something they pass with their own with their own Democrats or Republicans here in the state of California or New York.
I know. It's really, I hate to say it, the laws should be justified equally. I do feel bad. I mean, I have never smoked pot. I take it back. I have had a pot piece of brownie. My doctor, said, hey, you got to try it because I injured myself here 7 months ago, and I still can't fully walk. And I didn't want to be on pain pills. I tried it, and you know what? I didn't like it. It's not me. When I was in Vietnam, I remember a guy that, at that time, people would send their kids or their children over their weapons. When I was first in Vietnam, they were having problems with the ammo jamming in the M16s. And, a lot of people, their parents would send them like shotguns and stuff like that. No joke. And I remember this one time we came back from a firefight. One of the guys sat down like he normally did with his shot-off shotgun and, put pot in it and, was using it to smoke. Well, he didn't empty one of the chambers.
Wow.
And when that went off, I looked at that, and you know what? It deterred me of ever wanting to, ever use that type of stuff. I don't even drink. I might drink 2 or 3 beers a year, and that's it. I just don't believe in it. I don't need it. But I think our society is really scary. I can say this. My one son, we're going back years and years and years ago. I'm 68. One of my sons was in a junior high school. And I didn't know our landlord was a major pot grower. And I thought it was really strange. I was renting this mobile home, and I was paying back then real high power rates. So, I didn't realize that. Then I get a phone call from the principal of the school. And he says, you need to get down here. I got the chief of police here. I got, a couple of feds here, and I got all these people here. We need to have a talk. Well, it turned out my son broke into my landlord's mobile home, and he had a 30-pound trash bag full of you-know-what. And he had it in his locker at school. The janitor recognized the smell. But you know what? They whitewashed it. I expected my son to go into juvie, to go to court. You know what? They sat down between the chief of police and everybody. They said, we don't want this we don't want people to know about this.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
They suspended him from the school district. Okay? My neighbor, he got sentenced, I think, 7 or 8 years in prison.
Yeah. Well, you hit the key point right there. I tell you what, let me kind of spin this in the medication when you talk about marijuana. Most of the hospitals, I don't care what state it is, one of my first cases was a nurse. She was manufacturing methamphetamine, and she was a nurse at a major hospital. And what most hospitals will do, they'll make it go away because they don't want to tarnish their hospital reputation. If the public finds out if they had a nurse or a doctor or whatever, a staff member, out there pushing narcotics or got involved with narcotics, I can assure you 100% most of the time, the hospital will never notify DEA or any law enforcement. They will take care of the problem, and they will get rid of the nurse or transfer, if the doctor committed malpractice, transfer him to another state or another location. I worked the pharmaceutical for 5 years. I chased one of my first